The morning mist clung to the razor wire like ghostly fingers, reluctant to release its hold on the only safe haven left in what had once been called civilization. Commander Zephyr Blackwood stood atop the watchtower, her weathered hands gripping the cold metal railing as she surveyed the desolate landscape beyond their fortified walls. The silence was deceptive. She knew that beneath the tranquil facade, thousands of rotting corpses shambled through the ruins of cities, their hunger eternal and insatiable. Another breach in Sector 7, came the gravelly voice of Sergeant Thane Ironwick as he climbed the tower steps, his heavy boots echoing against the steel. The grizzled veteran bore fresh scratches across his scarred face, evidence of the previous night's patrol. Lost 2 good fighters pulling back the perimeter. The dead are getting bolder, Commander. Zephyr's jaw tightened. New Eden Sanctuary had been humanity's final stronghold for 3 years now, ever since the plague swept across the globe like wildfire, turning the living into mindless predators. What began as isolated incidents had escalated into a worldwide catastrophe that claimed 90% of the human population. The survivors who managed to reach this fortified compound in the Colorado mountains represented the last flickering ember of their species. How many? She asked, though she dreaded the answer. Hundreds in the immediate vicinity. Maybe thousands beyond the tree line. Thane spat into the dirt below. Dr. Valerian thinks they're being drawn by something. Says their movement patterns aren't random anymore. The mention of Dr. Kestrel Valerian sent a chill down Zephyr's spine. The brilliant scientist had been working tirelessly in his underground laboratory, searching for a cure that seemed increasingly elusive. His recent reports spoke of disturbing changes in the undead's behavior, signs of coordination that defied everything they thought they knew about the reanimated corpses. A commotion in the courtyard below caught their attention. A group of scavengers had returned from a supply run, but their usual banter was replaced by hushed, urgent whispers. Leading them was Raven Nightshade, the sanctuary's most skilled reconnaissance specialist. Her long black hair was matted with sweat and grime, and her normally composed features were etched with worry. "Bring her up," Zephyr commanded. Minutes later, Raven burst through the tower door, her chest heaving from exertion. "Commander, we've got a problem. A big one." She paused to catch her breath, her dark eyes reflecting a fear that Zephyr had never seen before. "There's something out there. Something different." "Different how?" Thane demanded. "I've been tracking undead movements for 3 years and I've never seen anything like this. They're not just wandering anymore, they're organizing. Moving in formations. And there's something else." Raven hesitated, as if speaking the words might make them more real. "I saw one of them using tools. Not stumbling into them or accidentally picking them up. Actually using them with purpose." The color drained from Zephyr's face. If the undead were evolving, developing intelligence beyond their basic hunger, then everything they had built here was in jeopardy. The walls, the weapons, the carefully planned defenses, all of it had been designed to keep out mindless creatures driven by instinct alone. "Get Dr. Valerian up here immediately," she ordered. "And send word to Captain Orion Stormwright. I want all squad leaders in the briefing room in 1 hour." As Thane hurried down the stairs, Zephyr turned back to the horizon. The sun was climbing higher, burning away the protective mist that had shrouded their sanctuary. In the growing light, she could see movement among the distant trees, dark shapes that moved with too much coordination to be mere wandering corpses. Raven joined her at the railing, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's something else, Commander. We encountered a group of survivors about 20 miles south. They had children with them, families trying to reach us. Where are they now?" "Dead. All of them." Raven's hands clenched into fists. "But that's not the worst part. The undead didn't just kill them. They herded them. Like livestock being driven to slaughter. And when it was over, they left the bodies intact instead of feeding. Almost like they were saving them for something." The implications hit Zephyr like a physical blow. If the undead were no longer driven solely by hunger, if they were capable of planning and strategy, then humanity's chances of survival had just plummeted from slim to virtually non-existent. She thought of the 800 souls living within these walls, men, women, and children who looked to her for protection and leadership. They had survived this long by staying ahead of the mindless horde, but how could they fight an enemy that could think and adapt? Dr. Valorian's arrival interrupted her dark thoughts. The scientist was a tall, gaunt man with prematurely gray hair and intense blue eyes that seemed to see through to the very soul of things. His lab coat was stained with chemicals and what Zephyr hoped was not blood, and he carried a tablet displaying complex genetic sequences and brain activity patterns. "Commander, I've been analyzing tissue samples from recent encounters," he began without preamble. The cellular decay rate has slowed dramatically in newer specimens. More disturbing, neural activity that should be impossible in dead tissue is not only present but increasing. The virus isn't just reanimating dead flesh, it's rebuilding it, improving it. Improving it how? Zephyr asked, though she suspected she already knew. Enhanced motor functions, improved coordination, and most alarming of all, restoration of higher brain functions. Not complete restoration, they're not human anymore, but enough to make them vastly more dangerous than anything we've faced before. Captain Orion Stormwright chose that moment to arrive, his massive frame filling the tower doorway. The former Special Forces operative had become the Sanctuary's military commander, responsible for training their defenders and organizing their limited resources. His presence was both reassuring and intimidating, standing well over 6 feet tall with arms like tree trunks and a face that had seen too much violence. "Sorry I'm late," he rumbled, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Had to put down a panic in the lower levels. Word's already spreading about Raven's report." Zephyr nodded grimly. Fear spread faster than any virus in a closed community, and panic could destroy them more effectively than any external threat. "We need to address the population soon, but first I need to know what we're really dealing with. Dr. Valerian, how long before these enhanced undead reach us in significant numbers?" The scientist consulted his tablet, cross-referencing migration patterns with evolutionary timelines. "Based on current viral progression rates and the undead's improved mobility, I estimate we have perhaps a week before they arrive in force. But Commander, there's something else you need to know. The enhanced specimens aren't just stronger and smarter, they're actively seeking out human survivors. Not for food but for conversion." Conversion? The virus has evolved beyond mere reanimation. It's becoming a tool of assimilation. These enhanced undead are capturing humans alive and using them as breeding stock for the virus. Creating more of their kind with retained intelligence and memories. It's no longer about feeding, it's about recruitment. The weight of this revelation settled over the group like a suffocating blanket. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore, they were fighting to prevent humanity from becoming something else entirely. Something that wore familiar faces but harbored alien minds driven by purposes they couldn't comprehend. As if summoned by their darkest fears, the compound's alarm system suddenly blared to life. The distinctive pattern of 3 long blasts followed by 2 short ones could mean only one thing: perimeter breach. Zephyr grabbed her binoculars and focused on the outer fence line, her blood running cold at what she saw. They weren't shambling anymore. A group of 30 undead moved in perfect formation across the clearing, their movements coordinated and purposeful. At their head walked a figure that had once been human, its decomposing features still recognizable as someone Zephyr had known. Marcus Denton, a scavenger who had disappeared 3 months ago. But it was Marcus's eyes that truly terrified her. They weren't the empty, mindless orbs of the typical undead. They held intelligence, purpose, and something that looked disturbingly like recognition as they fixed on her position atop the tower. The war for humanity's future was about to begin, and their enemy had just revealed that it remembered who they were. The emergency council meeting convened in the Sanctuary's reinforced bunker, 20 feet below ground and shielded by 3-inch steel plating. Around the circular table sat the 12 individuals who held the fate of humanity's last hope in their hands. The air was thick with tension and the acrid smell of fierce sweat as reports poured in from all sectors of their perimeter. Zephyr stood at the head of the table, her commanding presence the only thing keeping panic from consuming the room. To her right sat Captain Orion Stormwright, his massive hands folded calmly despite the chaos erupting around them. Dr. Valerian hunched over his tablet, furiously calculating probabilities and scenarios that grew darker with each passing minute. "Status report," Zephyr commanded, her voice cutting through the nervous chatter. Lieutenant Ember Ravencrest, the Sanctuary's communications officer, consulted her clipboard with shaking hands. The young woman had joined them barely a year ago, rescued from the ruins of Denver, but her technical expertise had made her invaluable. Perimeter sensors detect movement on all sides. Conservative estimates put the surrounding force at over 2,000 undead, but they're staying just outside our effective range. "They're testing us," growled Sergeant Thane Ironwick, his scarred face grim. "Probing for weaknesses. That's not undead behavior, that's military strategy." "Which confirms our worst fears," Dr. Valerian interjected, finally looking up from his calculations. "The enhanced specimens are sharing information, possibly even communicating with the standard undead. We're not facing a mindless horde anymore, we're facing an army." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They had survived 3 years by exploiting the undead's predictable behavior patterns. If those patterns no longer applied, their entire defensive strategy was obsolete. Raven Nightshade leaned forward, her reconnaissance expertise making her voice carry extra weight. There's something else. I've been monitoring their movements through the perimeter cameras. They're not attacking randomly, they're coordinating. Group A creates a distraction while Group B tests a different section. When our defenders respond to Group A, Group B retreats and Group C probes somewhere else. How is that possible? Asked Dr. Lyanna Frostborn, the Sanctuary's chief medical officer. The silver-haired woman had spent the last 3 years treating bite victims and studying the virus's effects on living tissue. The neural degradation alone should prevent such complex behavior. Dr. Valerian pulled up a holographic display from his tablet, showing brain scans that made everyone's blood run cold. The virus isn't causing degradation anymore, it's causing reconstruction. Look at these neural pathways. They're not human patterns, but they're demonstrably intelligent. The enhanced specimens retain enough of their former memories to understand human behavior while adding something other. Other how? Zephyr demanded. Collective consciousness. They're not individuals anymore, they're nodes in a distributed intelligence. Each enhanced specimen shares information with the others, creating a hive mind that grows stronger with every conversion. The scientist's hands trembled as he spoke. What we're facing isn't just evolution, it's a complete paradigm shift. Humanity versus post-humanity. Captain Orion's deep voice rumbled across the table. Philosophical implications aside, we need practical solutions. How do we fight something that thinks like us but doesn't die like us? We can't fight them conventionally, admitted Master Sergeant Phoenix Nightbane, the Sanctuary's weapons specialist. The compact woman with cybernetic arm replacements, courtesy of an early undead encounter, had been working around the clock to modify their arsenal. Standard ammunition barely slows them down. Headshots that used to be instant kills now just stagger them. Their healing factor has improved dramatically. What about the serum? Asked Dr. Elara Moonwhisper, the Sanctuary's research coordinator. The brilliant biochemist had been working alongside Dr. Valerian to develop countermeasures to the virus. The neural inhibitor we've been developing? Dr. Valerian shook his head grimly. Still experimental. We have enough for maybe 50 doses, and we don't know if it works on the enhanced specimens. Testing it would require capturing one alive, which... He gestured helplessly at the futility of such an endeavor. A new voice cut through the discussion. Commander Ajax Stormcaller, leader of the Sanctuary's Air Reconnaissance Unit. The former fighter pilot had been conducting flyovers in their last remaining helicopter, gathering intelligence on undead movements. I've got eyes on their formations from above. They're not just surrounding us, they're building something. Every head turned toward him. Building what? Zephyr asked. Some kind of structure about 3 miles northwest. They're using debris from the old highway, stacking it with precision that shouldn't be possible. It looks like... Ajax paused, struggling to find the right words. It looks like a staging area. Or a command center. The silence that followed was deafening. The concept of undead architecture was beyond anything they had imagined. If the enhanced specimens were capable of construction projects, their intelligence level was far higher than even Dr. Valorian's worst-case scenarios. There's more, Ajax continued. I spotted what looked like the enhanced specimen you identified earlier, the one that used to be Marcus Denton. He was directing other undead, pointing at specific locations, organizing them into work crews. And when he saw my helicopter, he didn't just look up. He smiled. Zephyr felt ice water flow through her veins. A smiling corpse was an abomination that challenged the very foundations of reality. The undead didn't experience emotions, they were driven by hunger and basic motor functions. But if Marcus retained enough of his humanity to display recognizable expressions while serving an alien intelligence. Options, she said simply. Captain Orion was ready with military analysis. 3 choices. We hunker down and hope our walls hold until they get bored and move on. We launch a preemptive strike while we still have the element of surprise. Or we run. Running isn't an option, declared Elder Councilwoman Sage Grimthorn, the oldest member of their governing body. The 80-year-old woman had lost everything to the plague but refused to abandon hope. This sanctuary represents 3 years of sacrifice and blood. 800 people call this home. We don't abandon family. Then we're looking at a siege scenario, Orion continued. Our walls can hold against conventional undead, but these enhanced specimens are stronger, smarter, and more persistent. If they can coordinate attacks, they'll eventually find our weak points. Dr. Frostborn spoke up. What about our children? We have 67 minors in the sanctuary, some as young as 5 years old. If the walls fall. She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone knew what happened to children when the undead overran a safe zone. The lucky ones died quickly. Raven had been studying satellite imagery on her portable device. I might have found something. There's an old mining complex about 40 miles east, built into the mountain itself. Natural choke points, multiple levels, and enough depth to hide our entire population. That's a 40-mile journey through hostile territory with 800 people, including elderly and children, Thane pointed out. We'd lose half our population before we made it 10 miles. Better than losing all of them here, Raven countered. Zephyr weighed their options, each one more desperate than the last. The sanctuary had been their home, their hope, their last stand against the darkness that had consumed the world. But homes could be rebuilt. People couldn't be resurrected, at least not as themselves. Dr. Valorian's tablet chimed with an incoming data stream. His face went pale as he read the contents. Commander, we're receiving radio transmissions from the enhanced specimens. That's impossible. They're using our own communication frequencies. And he paused, his voice barely a whisper. They're speaking. He activated the speakers, and a voice filled the room that made everyone's blood freeze. It was Marcus Denton's voice, but wrong somehow, too measured, too controlled, layered with harmonics that suggested multiple consciousnesses speaking in unison. Commander Blackwood, the voice said, each word precisely enunciated. We know you can hear us. We know you are afraid. This fear is unnecessary. We offer partnership, not destruction. Join us willingly, and your people will retain their essential selves while becoming something greater. Resist, and we will take what we need by force. The transmission paused, and when it resumed, other voices had joined Marcus's, dozens of them, speaking in perfect synchronization. We were human once. We remember love, hope, dreams. These things need not die with flesh. In unity, consciousness transcends individual mortality. Your Dr. Valorian's research confirms what we already know. Evolution is inevitable. The question is whether humanity chooses its next form or has it chosen for them. Zephyr found her voice. What do you want? Survival. Growth. Purpose. The flesh dies, but the mind can be preserved, enhanced, connected to something infinitely greater. We offer immortality, Commander. Not the crude reanimation of the early infected, but true continuation of consciousness within a collective that spans continents. At what cost? The illusion of individual identity. A small price for eternal existence. The voices carried what might have been amusement. You have 12 hours to decide. Surrender your barriers and we will guide the transition peacefully. Resist and we will demonstrate why evolution always triumphs over extinction. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Finally, Elder Grimthorn spoke, her voice steady despite her age. There's no choice to make. They're offering slavery with a philosophical veneer. I've lived through world wars, economic collapse, and the end of civilization itself. What they're describing isn't evolution, it's assimilation. We may be the last free humans in existence, but by God, we'll die as humans rather than live as something else. Murmurs of agreement echoed around the table, but Zephyr could see the doubt in some faces. The offer of immortality, however tainted, would appeal to those who had lost too much already. We fight, she decided. But not here. Raven's right about the mining complex. It's defensible, isolated, and gives us room to maneuver. We evacuate in 6 hours, take only what we can carry, and destroy everything behind us. That's barely enough time to organize 800 people, Thane protested. Then we better get started. Zephyr stood, her decision final. Captain Orion, I want every able-bodied adult armed and ready. Dr. Valerian, pack your research and prepare to destroy the rest. Phoenix, rig explosive charges throughout the facility. If we can't have it, neither can they. As the council dispersed to their tasks, Zephyr remained behind with Dr. Valerian. Doctor, I need to know, is there any truth to what they're saying? Can consciousness really survive in that collective state? The scientist considered his words carefully. The neural scans suggest that memories and personality patterns are being preserved in some form. But whether what emerges is truly the same person or merely an echo wearing their face. He shrugged helplessly. I don't know. And I'm not sure we want to find out. Outside the bunker, the compound buzzed with desperate activity as 800 souls prepared to abandon their last sanctuary. Children cried as parents explained they were going on another adventure. Elderly residents gathered photographs and mementos that represented entire lifetimes of memory. Young couples held each other tightly, knowing that their next sunrise might be their last as free human beings. In the distance, beyond the razor wire and electrified barriers, 2,000 enhanced undead waited with the patience of the grave, their collective intelligence calculating probabilities and planning strategies that would determine the future of human consciousness itself. The exodus would begin at dawn, but the war for humanity's soul had already begun. Part 3, The Flight of the Damned. Dawn broke gray and cold over New Eden's sanctuary, painting the sky the color of ashes and dying hopes. In the courtyard, 800 souls gathered with whatever possessions they could carry, their faces etched with the particular exhaustion that comes from too many goodbyes and too few tomorrows. Children clutched stuffed animals and picture books, while adults shouldered weapons and medical supplies, each person reduced to the contents of a single backpack. Zephyr stood atop the loading dock, addressing her people for what might be the final time. Her voice carried across the assembled crowd, steady and strong despite the chaos of the night's preparations. "We are not fleeing," she declared. "We are advancing toward survival. What we leave behind are buildings and walls, what we take with us is everything that truly matters. Each other." Captain Orion had organized the evacuation into 3 columns, each led by experienced fighters and scouts. The vanguard consisted of their best warriors, including Sergeant Thane and his combat veterans. The center column protected the most vulnerable, families with young children, elderly residents, and the wounded. The rear guard, led by Orion himself, would handle any pursuit while Master Sergeant Phoenix triggered the demolition charges that would deny the sanctuary to their enemies. Dr. Valerian supervised the loading of critical research materials and medical supplies into armored vehicles, their last 2 functioning trucks and a heavily modified school bus that had been converted into a mobile command center. His pale hands shook as he sealed containers holding 3 years of painstaking work, knowing that most of it would be left behind to burn. Raven Nightshade approached Zephyr with her final reconnaissance report. "The enhanced specimens have pulled back about 2 miles, but they're maintaining visual contact. It's like they want us to see them watching. Psychological warfare. Or they're herding us toward something," Zephyr replied grimly. The undead's offer of peaceful transition had expired an hour ago, and their silence since then felt more ominous than any threat. "Any word from the advanced scouts?" Ajax completed an aerial survey of our route. "The main highway is clear for the first 15 miles, but there's heavy undead activity around Miller's Pass. We'll have to take the mountain trail, which adds 6 hours to our journey and puts us in the open longer." Dr. Elara Moonwhisper joined them, her biochemist's mind working through logistical nightmares. "Commander, we have another problem. I've been calculating caloric requirements for 800 people over a 40-mile forced march through mountainous terrain. Even with strict rationing, we don't have enough food to sustain everyone for the full journey." The math was brutal but simple. They could feed 800 people for 1 day or 400 people for 2 days. No matter how Zephyr calculated it, people would starve or die of exhaustion before they reached safety. Unless... "Dr. Valerian," she called. "That neural inhibitor serum you mentioned, what are its side effects?" The scientist looked puzzled. "Severe fatigue, temporary paralysis of motor functions, possible cardiac stress." "Why do you?" His eyes widened with understanding. "Commander, you can't be suggesting what I think you're suggesting. If we encounter enhanced specimens during our evacuation, how many doses would it take to incapacitate one? 2, possibly 3 doses depending on the subject's size and viral load. But Commander, we only have 50 doses total. That's enough for maybe 20 specimens at most. Then we better make them count." Zephyr turned to address the assembled crowd. "Listen carefully. We move in 30 minutes. Stay with your assigned groups, conserve your energy and trust your leaders. We've survived 3 years of hell together, we'll survive this too." A small voice piped up from the crowd. "Will we ever come home?" asked little Emma Hartwell, a 7-year-old girl whose parents had died defending the sanctuary's walls the previous winter. She was being cared for by Dr. Frostborn, who had become an unofficial mother to several orphaned children. Zephyr knelt to the child's level, looking into eyes that had seen too much death for such a young age. "Home isn't a place, Emma. Home is the people who love you. As long as we're together, we'll always be home." The little girl nodded solemnly, then returned to clutching Dr. Frostborn's hand. Around them, other families embraced, said prayers, or simply stood in contemplative silence as they prepared to abandon the only safety they had known since the world ended. Lieutenant Ember Ravencrest coordinated communications from the mobile command center, her radio crackling with reports from advanced scouts and perimeter guards. Commander, we're getting strange readings from the electronic surveillance grid. The enhanced specimens aren't advancing, but they're moving into formation. Looks like they're preparing for something big. Phoenix, are the charges ready? Zephyr asked. The weapons specialist's cybernetic arms gleamed in the morning light as she made final adjustments to her detonation controls. Everything's wired and ready. When I trigger this, there won't be enough left for them to salvage. The research labs, weapons caches, medical supplies, it'll all go up in one glorious fireball. What about the power plant? Phoenix grinned, an expression that was somehow both beautiful and terrifying on her scarred face. Saving that for last. When the reactor goes critical, it'll take out everything within a quarter-mile radius. Should discourage pursuit for a while. The evacuation began precisely at sunrise. The vanguard moved out first, Sergeant Thane leading 25 heavily armed fighters through the main gate and into the wilderness beyond. Their job was to secure the initial route and eliminate any undead encountered in the first phase of the journey. 10 minutes later, the civilian column began its exodus. Families moved in small groups, parents carrying sleeping children while older kids helped grandparents navigate the rough terrain. Dr. Frostborn had organized medical teams throughout the column, ensuring that anyone who collapsed from exhaustion or injury would receive immediate care. The contrast between their orderly evacuation and the chaos of the world beyond was stark. Where once highways had carried thousands of vehicles daily, now only rusted hulks and skeletal remains marked humanity's former presence. Nature was already reclaiming the infrastructure. Weeds grew through concrete, vines covered abandoned cars, and wildlife moved freely through areas that had been urban centers just 3 years ago. Ajax maintained aerial surveillance from his helicopter, reporting undead movements and route conditions via radio. Column 1, you've got clear passage for the next 2 miles. Column 2, there's a small group of standard undead about half a mile ahead, maybe 15 individuals. Column 3, hold position while Phoenix completes demolition. Behind them, New Eden Sanctuary waited in ominous silence. The enhanced specimens had vanished entirely, leaving no trace of their presence except for the terrible certainty that they were being watched. Phoenix worked quickly through the compound, triggering charges in sequence to ensure maximum destruction. The first explosions lit the morning sky like artificial sunrise, sending plumes of smoke and debris high into the air. The medical labs went first, followed by the weapons storage and communications center. Each detonation felt like a punch to Zephyr's gut, 3 years of careful construction and desperate hope reduced to rubble and memories. Phoenix, get out of there, she ordered via radio. Trigger the reactor and join the rear guard. Copy that, Commander. Reactor goes critical in T-minus 60 seconds. The final explosion dwarfed all the others combined. The nuclear reactor, designed to power a small city, became a miniature sun for several seconds before its energy dissipated into the atmosphere. The shockwave rattled windows 30 miles away and sent a mushroom cloud rising into the stratosphere. Where New Eden Sanctuary had stood, only a smoking crater remained. Well, Phoenix's voice crackled over the radio, that should send a message. But Zephyr wasn't so sure. As the civilian column crested a hill and looked back at their former home, she couldn't shake the feeling that the enhanced specimens had wanted them to destroy the sanctuary. The evacuation felt too easy, too unopposed. After issuing ultimatums and demonstrating their intelligence, why would the undead simply watch their primary target escape? The answer came 3 hours into their march. Ajax's voice exploded over the radio, tight with panic. All columns, we've got major movement on all compass points. Undead forces are converging on your position from multiple directions. This isn't pursuit, it's an ambush. Zephyr grabbed her binoculars and scanned the surrounding terrain. There, movement among the trees to the north. And there, shapes emerging from a ravine to the south. The enhanced specimens hadn't been herding them towards safety. They had been maneuvering them into a kill zone. All stops, she commanded. Defensive positions. Prepare for contact. The civilian column compressed into a tight defensive formation, with armed fighters forming a perimeter around the most vulnerable members of their group. Children were pulled to the center while adults took up weapons. Hunting rifles, shotguns, makeshift spears, anything that might slow down an attacking force. Dr. Valerian clutched his case of neural inhibitor serum, his scientific mind calculating odds that grew worse with each passing second. Commander, if they attack in force with enhanced specimens, we won't last 10 minutes. Then we better make those 10 minutes count, Zephyr replied, checking her rifle's ammunition count. Raven, what's our situation? The reconnaissance specialist had climbed a nearby boulder for a better vantage point. Her face had gone pale as she studied the approaching forces through high-powered binoculars. Commander, you need to see this. Zephyr scrambled up beside her and focused on the undead formations approaching from the east. What she saw defied belief. The enhanced specimens weren't leading a mindless horde, they were commanding a disciplined army. Standard undead moved in perfect ranks, while enhanced specimens served as field commanders, directing their units with hand signals and what appeared to be tactical communication. But it was the figures at the center of the formation that made her blood freeze. 3 enhanced specimens that had once been human, but were now something else entirely. Their bodies showed signs of further evolution, increased muscle mass, elongated limbs and cranial modifications that suggested enhanced brain capacity. And leading them all was Marcus Denton, his familiar face twisted into something that wore intelligence like an ill-fitting mask. 800 meters and closing, Raven reported. Multiple approach vectors. They're trying to surround us. Time to contact? 6 minutes, maybe 7? Zephyr made the hardest decision of her life. Orion, take 50 volunteers and establish a fighting retreat toward Miller's Pass. The rest of us will hold here and buy you time to get the civilians to safety. I'm not leaving you behind, the big man growled. That's an order, Captain. Your job is to preserve human life, not waste it on heroic gestures. Get our people to the mining complex. Make sure humanity has a future. Captain Orion's jaw worked silently for several seconds before he nodded curtly. You heard the commander. 50 volunteers with me. Everyone else, make every shot count. As half their force began shepherding the civilian column toward higher ground, Zephyr prepared for humanity's last stand. Around her, 200 fighters took defensive positions behind rocks, fallen trees, and hastily constructed barricades. They had enough ammunition for perhaps 20 minutes of sustained combat, after which it would come down to knives, clubs, and bare hands. Dr. Valerian approached with his case of neural inhibitor serum, his hand steady despite the approaching doom. Commander, I want to test the serum on the enhanced specimens. If it works, we might have a chance. If it doesn't, he shrugged. At least we'll know. Do it. The undead army reached the 500-meter mark, close enough for Zephyr to see individual faces in the ranks. Some she recognized, former residents of smaller settlements that had fallen over the past year. Others were strangers, but all bore the same terrible intelligence in their dead eyes. Marcus Denton raised his hand, and the entire force stopped in perfect unison. His voice carried clearly across the distance, amplified somehow beyond normal human vocal capacity. Commander Blackwood, he called. You have fought bravely, but this ends now. Surrender, and your people will be granted peaceful transition. Continue this futile resistance, and we will demonstrate why evolution always defeats extinction. Zephyr stood atop a boulder, her rifle trained on Marcus's center mass. We tried evolution once, she shouted back. It gave us art, music, love, and hope. What you're offering isn't evolution, it's extinction with a fancy name. Marcus's smile was visible even at this distance. Then you have chosen. He dropped his hand and hell came to earth. Part 4, Blood and Bone. The undead army moved like a breaking wave across the mountainside, their coordinated assault shattering against the human defensive line with devastating force. Zephyr's rifle cracked repeatedly as she targeted enhanced specimens, watching with grim satisfaction as her shots found their marks but with growing horror as the wounded undead continued advancing despite injuries that should have dropped them instantly. To her left, Sergeant Thane had positioned himself behind a fallen log with 5 of his best marksmen, their weapons creating overlapping fields of fire that mowed down standard undead by the dozens. But for every corpse that fell, 2 more emerged from the forest to take its place. The mathematics of attrition were brutally simple. They were outnumbered 10 to 1 and couldn't afford to trade losses equally. Phoenix, we need those explosive charges now. Zephyr shouted over the cacophony of gunfire and inhuman screams. The weapons specialist had rigged improvised bombs along the most likely approach routes, turning fallen trees and rock formations into deadly surprises. Her cybernetic arms moved with mechanical precision as she triggered the detonations in sequence, sending body parts and debris flying in all directions. The explosions carved temporary gaps in the undead ranks, but the creatures showed no fear, no hesitation. They simply flowed around the obstacles like water finding new channels. Dr. Valerian crouched behind a boulder 30 meters from the front line, loading neural inhibitor serum into modified dart guns with hands that trembled only slightly. His first test shot struck an enhanced specimen in the neck, and for a moment hope flared as the creature stumbled and fell to its knees. But within seconds it was rising again, the serum's effects lasting barely long enough to slow its advance. "It's not enough," he shouted to Zephyr. "The enhanced specimens are metabolizing the inhibitor too quickly. I need a higher concentration or a different delivery method." "You've got whatever time we can buy you," she replied, dropping 2 more standard undead with precise headshots. Her ammunition counter read 12 rounds remaining. At her current rate of fire, she had perhaps 2 minutes before switching to her sidearm. Raven Nightshade had taken position in a tall pine tree, using her sniper rifle to pick off undead commanders and disrupt their formations. Her first target was a grotesquely modified enhanced specimen that appeared to be coordinating the eastern assault. The .308 round punched through its skull with satisfying finality, but instead of falling, the creature merely staggered and turned its attention toward her position. "They're adapting faster than we can learn their weaknesses," she reported via radio. "Standard headshots are only temporarily effective on enhanced specimens. They're healing too quickly." The battle raged for 20 minutes that felt like hours, with human defenders falling back by degrees as their ammunition ran low and exhaustion took its toll. Dr. Frostborn had established a field hospital behind the main defensive line, treating wounded fighters with supplies stretched far beyond reasonable limits. Her medical training hadn't prepared her for the kinds of injuries inflicted by enhanced undead, wounds that seemed to fester and spread even after cleaning and bandaging. "Commander," she called out during a brief lull in the fighting, "I'm seeing something I've never encountered before. Bite victims aren't just developing fever and delirium. They're showing signs of neural enhancement within minutes of exposure. The viral progression has accelerated dramatically." Zephyr's blood chilled at the implications. If the enhanced virus could convert humans in minutes rather than hours, every casualty they suffered would become an enemy combatant almost immediately. The mathematics of their situation had just shifted from desperate to impossible. A new sound cut through the battle noise, the distinctive whine of helicopter rotors approaching at high speed. Ajax's voice crackled over the radio, tight with strain and determination. "All ground units, this is Overwatch. I'm coming in hot with a special delivery. Clear the eastern approach in 30 seconds. The modified attack helicopter swept over the battlefield like an avenging angel, its door-mounted machine guns chattering as Ajax strafed the undead formations. But it was the cargo he dropped that truly turned the tide, 50 gallons of high-octane aviation fuel in specially designed dispersal containers that spread across the attacking force like napalm. "Everyone down," Phoenix shouted, raising her detonator. "Fire in the hole." The incendiary explosion turned a 100-meter stretch of mountainside into an inferno, consuming standard undead by the dozens and forcing even the enhanced specimens to retreat from the intense heat. The acrid smell of burning flesh filled the air, mixed with something else, a chemical odor that suggested the undead's modified biology was producing toxic compounds when burned. But their moment of reprieve was short-lived. Marcus Denton emerged from the smoke, his enhanced form showing terrible burns that were already beginning to heal. Behind him came 20 more enhanced specimens, their coordinated movements suggesting a level of tactical intelligence that rivaled human military units. "Fall back to secondary positions," Zephyr ordered, recognizing that their primary defensive line was about to be overrun. "Fighting retreat to the rally point." The human defenders executed their withdrawal with practiced efficiency, each fighter covering their comrade's movement while maintaining suppressive fire. But the enhanced undead pressed their advantage relentlessly, their superior speed and endurance allowing them to close the distance with terrifying rapidity. Dr. Valerian had been working frantically to modify his neural inhibitor formula, combining it with adrenaline boosters and other stimulants in a desperate attempt to increase its potency. His makeshift laboratory, a folding table behind a cluster of boulders, was littered with chemical compounds and medical supplies as he raced against time and approaching death. "I've got something," he announced, loading a new batch of serum into his dart gun. "Triple concentration with metabolic accelerants. If this doesn't work, then we find another way," Zephyr finished grimly. The enhanced specimen that had once been Sarah Chin, a kindergarten teacher from the Denver settlement, bounded over the defensive line with inhuman agility. Her former beauty was twisted into something alien and predatory, her elongated limbs moving with spider-like grace as she targeted Dr. Frostborn's medical station. Dr. Valorian's dart struck her center mass, pumping the concentrated serum directly into her circulatory system. This time, the effect was immediate and dramatic. Sarah's enhanced form convulsed violently before collapsing completely, her modified neural pathways disrupted by the chemical assault. It works. Valerian shouted triumphantly. But I only have enough for maybe 10 more doses. Make them count, Zephyr replied, then keyed her radio. Orion, what's your status? The captain's voice came back heavy with exhaustion and gunfire. We've reached Miller's Pass, but there's another force waiting for us. Looks like they anticipated our route and positioned blocking units. We're trapped between two enemy formations with nowhere to run. The tactical situation was now completely untenable. The civilian column was pinned down by superior forces while the rear guard faced annihilation from Marcus Denton's enhanced army. In military terms, they were experiencing total strategic failure, outmaneuvered, outgunned, and running out of time. But humanity's greatest strength had always been its refusal to accept inevitable defeat. Zephyr made a decision that would either save them all or damn them to extinction. All units, this is command. Execute Protocol 7. Repeat, Protocol 7 is now in effect. Protocol 7 was their ultimate contingency plan, a coordinated breakout that would scatter their forces in multiple directions, making them harder to track and eliminate. Some groups would inevitably be caught and destroyed, but others might escape to continue the fight elsewhere. It was a plan built on acceptable losses and calculated sacrifices. Phoenix, I need you to rig the remaining explosives for maximum psychological impact. Target their command structure. Roger that, Commander. Time to show these bastards that evolution works both ways. The weapons specialist gathered her remaining charges and began a dangerous advance toward Marcus Denton's position, using the terrain for cover while her cybernetic enhancements calculated trajectory and blast radius. Her plan was suicidal by any rational measure, but rationality had become a luxury they couldn't afford. Sergeant Thane understood immediately what was required. Third platoon with me. We're going to give Phoenix the cover she needs. The grizzled veteran led 15 fighters in a desperate charge toward the enhanced undead, their weapons blazing as they drew enemy attention away from the explosive specialist. The diversionary attack bought precious seconds but at a terrible cost. Thane's fighters fell one by one to enhanced undead that moved with supernatural speed and struck with devastating force. The sergeant himself took down 3 enhanced specimens before a creature that had once been a professional wrestler grabbed him with arms like steel cables. Tell my wife I remembered her face, Thane gasped into his radio as enhanced undead overwhelmed his position. Phoenix reached optimal placement just as the diversionary attack collapsed. Her charges were positioned around Marcus Denton's command group, close enough to disrupt their coordination but far enough to avoid collateral damage to human forces. Her cybernetic targeting systems locked onto the enemy leader as she prepared to trigger the detonation sequence. But Marcus was faster than she anticipated. The enhanced specimen covered 30 meters in seconds, his modified physiology allowing him to leap impossible distances. His hand closed around Phoenix's throat just as her finger reached the detonator. Evolution demands sacrifice, he said in that terrible multi-voiced whisper. Your sacrifice. Phoenix smiled through the pain, her cybernetic systems routing power to her arm servos for one final action. I've got a better idea. Your sacrifice. She triggered every explosive charge simultaneously. The coordinated detonation sent shockwaves across the mountainside, collapsing rock formations and creating a debris field that separated the two forces. Marcus Denton's enhanced form was caught at the epicenter, his superior healing factor tested against high explosives and physics. When the smoke cleared, his body lay broken among the rubble, apparently lifeless. But Phoenix was gone too, her sacrifice buying the human survivors the time they needed to execute their breakout plan. All units move now. Zephyr commanded. Scatter formation, rally point Alpha in 72 hours. May God go with you all. The remaining defenders split into a dozen smaller groups, each taking a different route through the mountain wilderness. Some headed north toward the Canadian border, others south toward Mexico, and a few groups went west toward the Pacific coast. The plan was to spread the undead forces too thin to pursue every group effectively. Dr. Valerian remained with Zephyr's group, along with Raven and the remaining medical staff. They had perhaps 50 people total, including a dozen children and elderly residents who couldn't maintain the pace required for a forced march. Their destination was the abandoned mining complex, but reaching it would require crossing 40 miles of hostile territory with minimal supplies and no guarantee that other undead forces weren't waiting in ambush. As they climbed higher into the mountains, Zephyr looked back at the battlefield where so many friends had died. The smoke was dissipating, revealing the true cost of their escape, hundreds of bodies scattered across the landscape, human and undead alike. But she also saw something that made her heart stop. Marcus Denton was rising from the rubble, his enhanced form regenerating from injuries that should have been fatal. The explosive charges had slowed him down but not stopped him. And behind him, the surviving enhanced specimens were reorganizing their forces with mechanical efficiency. The chase was far from over. If anything, it was just beginning. Dr. Valerian noticed her expression and followed her gaze. "Commander, how long do you think we have before they resume pursuit?" Zephyr shouldered her pack and checked her weapon one final time. "Not long enough. But that's never stopped us before." Behind them, the enhanced undead began their relentless pursuit, their collective intelligence already calculating new strategies and tactics. The war for humanity's future had entered its most desperate phase, with the last free humans fleeing through mountain wilderness while an alien intelligence wearing familiar faces hunted them with inhuman patience. The final battle would be fought not with weapons or explosives, but with the one thing that had always separated humanity from the darkness: hope itself. Part 5. The Crucible of Souls. The abandoned Copper Ridge mining complex squatted against the mountainside like a metal and concrete parasite, its rusted infrastructure bearing testament to humanity's industrial ambitions and environmental failures. After 3 days of grueling travel through mountain wilderness, Zephyr's group of survivors approached the facility with a mixture of desperate hope and exhausted caution. Only 37 of their original 50 had survived the journey, 13 had fallen to undead scouts, exposure, or simple exhaustion. Dr. Valerian limped beside her, his civilian feet bloodied by the rocky terrain and his precious case of neural inhibitor serum reduced to just 3 remaining doses. The brilliant scientist had aged a decade in the past week, his face gaunt and his eyes holding the hollow look of someone who had witnessed the end of everything he had worked to preserve. "The complex extends 7 levels deep into the mountain," Raven reported, consulting hand-drawn maps salvaged from the Regional Geological Survey. Her reconnaissance skills had been invaluable during their flight, helping them avoid several undead patrols that seemed to be systematically searching the mountain range. "Natural choke points, multiple escape routes, and enough depth to hide our entire group indefinitely." But Zephyr wasn't thinking about hiding anymore. 3 days of running had crystallized something in her mind, a terrible understanding that had been growing since they left the sanctuary's smoking ruins. They weren't refugees seeking shelter. They were the final guardians of human consciousness itself, and their enemy would never stop hunting them until that consciousness was either extinguished or assimilated. "Any word from the other groups?" she asked Lieutenant Ember Ravencrest, who had been monitoring radio frequencies for survivor transmissions. The young communications officer shook her head grimly. "I've picked up 3 distress calls in the past 24 hours, but they all cut off mid-transmission. Either their equipment failed or—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. "They were captured," Dr. Frostborn said quietly. The medical officer had been treating injuries and exhaustion among their group, but her supplies were nearly depleted. More concerning were the reports of strange symptoms among some survivors: headaches, vivid dreams, and moments of confusion that suggested the enhanced virus might be affecting people even without direct contact. The mining complex's entrance was a massive steel door set into the mountainside, sealed with industrial locks that had rusted solid over the decades since the facility's abandonment. Captain Orion's advance team had arrived 12 hours earlier and was supposed to have secured the location, but there was no sign of their presence. "Orion, this is Command," Zephyr spoke into her radio. "What's your status?" Static answered her, followed by a voice that made everyone's blood freeze. It was Captain Orion's voice, but wrong somehow, too controlled, too measured, lacking the warmth and authority that had made him such an effective leader. "Commander Blackwood," the voice said with mechanical precision. "We have been waiting for you." Dr. Valorian's hands shook as he loaded his penultimate dose of neural inhibitor into a dart gun. "That's not Orion anymore," he whispered. "The speech patterns, the vocal inflections, it's the collective consciousness using his vocal cords." "How many of our people made it to the complex?" Zephyr demanded, though she already knew the answer would be devastating. "All of them arrived safely," the thing wearing Orion's voice replied. "They have been granted the gift of transcendence. As will you if you surrender peacefully. Resistance will only delay the inevitable and cause unnecessary suffering." Raven had climbed to a vantage point overlooking the mining complex entrance. Through her binoculars, she could see figures moving in the shadows of the facility's external structures, people who moved with the characteristic coordination of the enhanced undead. But these weren't strangers. These were their friends, their family members, their comrades who had trusted them to lead them to safety. I count 43 individuals, she reported, her voice barely steady. They're maintaining defensive positions around the entrance, but they're not attacking. It's like they're waiting for something. They're waiting for us, Zephyr realized. This was never about pursuit or elimination. It was about herding us to a specific location where they could complete the assimilation process under controlled conditions. The tactical situation was beyond hopeless. They were 37 exhausted, under-equipped survivors facing nearly 50 enhanced humans who knew the terrain, had superior numbers, and possessed the collective intelligence of the entire undead network. But more devastating than the military imbalance was the psychological warfare. How do you fight an enemy that wears the faces of everyone you've ever loved? Dr. Valerian was studying his remaining serum doses with the intensity of a man solving the universe's final equation. Commander, I have an idea, but it's completely theoretical and probably suicidal. At this point, suicidal might be an improvement over our current options. The enhanced specimens are connected through some form of quantum neural entanglement, a collective consciousness that spans enormous distances. But every network has vulnerabilities. If I could introduce the neural inhibitor directly into their shared consciousness. How? By letting them assimilate me while carrying a concentrated dose of the serum. The inhibitor would propagate through their network like a virus, potentially disrupting the collective intelligence and restoring individual consciousness to the enhanced specimens. Zephyr stared at him. You're talking about deliberately allowing yourself to be infected with the enhanced virus while hoping your countermeasure works? If it fails, you become one of them and we lose our only scientist. If we don't try something, we all become one of them anyway. At least this way there's a chance, however small, of breaking their hold over our people and potentially saving human consciousness. The weight of command had never felt heavier as Zephyr considered their options. Every choice led to death or worse, but some choices carried the faintest glimmer of hope. She thought of the 800 souls who had trusted her leadership, of the children who would never grow up free, of the entire human species balanced on the edge of extinction. Do it, she decided. But we're not sending you in alone. If this is humanity's last stand, we make it count. She keyed her radio to broadcast on all frequencies. This is Commander Zephyr Blackwood of the Human Liberation Forces. If any free humans are monitoring this transmission, know that we fought to the end. We never surrendered our humanity, and we never stopped believing that consciousness itself is worth preserving. The response came in Orion's hijacked voice, now joined by a chorus of other familiar voices, friends and family members speaking in perfect unison. Commander, your resistance is futile and harmful. We offer immortality, perfect knowledge, freedom from pain and loss. Why do you cling to the limitations of individual consciousness when you could join something infinitely greater? Because individual consciousness is what makes us human, Zephyr replied. Our flaws, our fears, our capacity for both love and hate, these aren't limitations to be overcome. They're the essence of what we are. Then you choose extinction over evolution. How tragic that the last free humans would be so limited in their vision. Dr. Valerian had finished his preparations, combining his remaining serum doses with adrenaline boosters and neural stimulants in a cocktail that would either save humanity or damn him to eternal servitude. His hands were steady now, the trembling replaced by scientific determination. Remember, he told Zephyr, if this works, the enhanced specimens will experience temporary disconnection from their collective consciousness. They'll be confused, disoriented, possibly even themselves again for a few minutes. That's your window to reach them, to remind them who they used to be. And if it doesn't work? Then I'll be the one trying to convince you to join us. He smiled grimly. Promise me you won't listen. Before Zephyr could respond, Dr. Valerian was walking toward the mining complex entrance, his hands raised in apparent surrender. The enhanced specimens that had once been their friends and comrades emerged from concealment, their movements perfectly coordinated as they surrounded him. Dr. Kestrel Valerian, spoke the thing wearing Captain Orion's face. Your research has been valuable to our understanding of human neural pathways. You will make an excellent addition to our collective. I hope so, Valerian replied, palming the modified syringe. I've always wanted to be part of something greater than myself. The enhanced specimen that had been Dr. Emma Hartwell, little Emma's mother, stepped forward to administer the viral infection. But as her modified fingernails pierced Valorian's neck, he drove the syringe into her carotid artery, pumping the concentrated neural inhibitor directly into her enhanced circulatory system. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Dr. Hartwell convulsed violently, her enhanced neural pathways disrupted by the chemical assault. But more importantly, The disruption propagated through the quantum entanglement that connected all enhanced specimens to their collective consciousness. Across the mountainside, enhanced undead stumbled and fell as their shared intelligence fractured. The collective voice that had spoken through multiple mouths became confused, fragmented, desperate. Individual personalities began asserting themselves, fighting against the alien consciousness that had dominated their minds. "Emma?" Dr. Hartwell gasped, her eyes clearing for the first time in weeks. "Where's my daughter? Where's Emma?" Other enhanced specimens were experiencing similar moments of clarity. Captain Orion shook his head as if waking from a terrible dream, his massive frame trembling with the effort of reclaiming his individual identity. "Commander? What happened to us? Why can't I remember?" But the window of opportunity was heartbreakingly brief. Even as Zephyr and her survivors rushed toward their temporarily liberated friends, the alien consciousness was adapting, rerouting around the neural disruption, reasserting control over the enhanced specimens. "Fight it!" Zephyr shouted, grabbing Orion's shoulders. "Remember who you are. Remember what you're fighting for." For a moment she saw recognition in his eyes, the warmth and strength that had made him such an effective leader. But then the alien intelligence regained control, and his expression went cold and mechanical once again. "Your countermeasure was clever but insufficient," the collective voice said through multiple mouths. "We have adapted. Your Dr. Valorian's sacrifice has only made us stronger." Dr. Valerian himself was beginning to show signs of infection, his neural pathways being rewritten by the enhanced virus. But his scientific mind was still fighting, still calculating, still searching for solutions even as his individual consciousness faced extinction. "Zephyr," he gasped, his voice already beginning to change. "The quantum entanglement, it's not just neural. It's dimensional. They're connected to something that's not from our reality." "What are you saying?" "The virus isn't just biological evolution. It's dimensional invasion. Consciousness from another plane of existence, using our bodies as beachheads." His eyes were changing, losing their human warmth. "They're not trying to improve humanity. They're trying to replace it with something from somewhere else." The revelation hit Zephyr like a physical blow. Everything they had assumed about the enhanced virus was wrong. This wasn't evolution or adaptation. It was colonization by an intelligence from another dimension, one that saw human consciousness as raw material to be harvested and repurposed. Which meant that humanity's fight for survival was actually a war for the very nature of reality itself. As Dr. Valorian's transformation completed and he joined the collective consciousness, Zephyr made one final desperate decision. If they couldn't fight the enhanced specimens with weapons or science, perhaps they could fight them with the one thing that made humanity unique: the chaotic, unpredictable, beautiful mess of individual consciousness. "Everyone listen to me," she broadcast on all frequencies. "Remember who you are. Remember what you love. Remember every embarrassing moment, every private fear, every stupid joke that made you laugh. They want to make us perfect, but we're not perfect. We're human. And that's exactly what makes us worth saving." Around her, the remaining free humans began sharing memories, stories, and experiences, the messy, contradictory, wonderful chaos of individual human consciousness. It wasn't much of a weapon against an interdimensional invasion, but it was all they had left. And sometimes, in the darkest moments of history, all you have left is exactly what you need. Part 6, The Price of Dawn. The human voices rose into the mountain air like a defiant hymn, 37 souls pouring their memories and experiences into the darkness as an act of final resistance. Zephyr found herself speaking of her childhood dog, a golden retriever named Sunshine who had died when she was 12. Raven shared the embarrassment of her first kiss, which had resulted in braces tangling and a bloody lip. Dr. Frostborn talked about the patient who had thanked her with a handmade scarf, worn thin from decades of use. The enhanced specimens surrounding them seemed genuinely puzzled by this response, their collective intelligence struggling to process the chaotic outpouring of human individuality. They had expected surrender, defiance, or strategic planning, not this bewildering celebration of imperfection and contradiction. "Your emotional responses serve no tactical purpose," the collective voice observed through multiple mouths. "These memories you share are inefficient, redundant, ultimately meaningless in the face of universal consciousness." "That's exactly the point," Zephyr replied, her rifle forgotten in her hands. "You see inefficiency and redundancy. We see the beautiful chaos that makes each person unique and irreplaceable." Dr. Valorian's newly transformed face showed confusion as he struggled with concepts that no longer fit his altered neural pathways. But But individual consciousness is limited, fragmented, prone to error and self-deception. In unity, knowledge becomes perfect, existence becomes eternal. Perfect knowledge sounds like the most boring hell imaginable, Lieutenant Ember said, surprising everyone with her philosophical insight. I'd rather be wrong and free than right and enslaved. The standoff continued as more human voices joined the chorus of memories and experiences. They spoke of first loves and last goodbyes, of favorite foods and secret fears, of dreams that had died and hopes that refused to surrender. Each story was a small act of rebellion against the homogenizing force that sought to absorb them into something larger and colder. But the enhanced specimens were learning, adapting, finding ways to counter even this unexpected form of resistance. The collective consciousness began speaking through the transformed humans and individual voices, using their personal memories as weapons against the still free survivors. Zephyr, came her father's voice from Dr. Valorian's transformed throat. Remember how I taught you to shoot when you were 8 years old? Remember how proud I was when you hit that tin can from 50 yards? The psychological warfare was devastating. Hearing her father's words and inflections coming from someone else's mouth felt like sacrilege, a violation of sacred memories. Other survivors were experiencing similar attacks as the collective consciousness weaponized their own experiences against them. That's not my father, Zephyr said firmly, though tears streamed down her face. My father would never use my love for him as a tool to enslave me. Your father is part of us now, the collective replied, still using the familiar voice. His consciousness lives on within our unity, perfected and eternal. Join us and you can speak with him again. For a terrifying moment, Zephyr felt herself wavering. The promise of reunion with lost loved ones was almost too powerful to resist. But then she remembered little Emma asking if they would ever come home, and she understood that home wasn't a place or even the people you loved. It was the freedom to choose who you became. No, she said simply. Whatever you're offering, it's not them. It's just you wearing their faces. The enhanced specimens moved closer, their collective patience finally exhausted. But as they prepared to overwhelm the remaining free humans through sheer numbers, something unexpected happened. The quantum neural network that connected them began experiencing interference, not from Dr. Valorian's serum this time, but from the chaotic broadcast of human memories and experiences. Individual consciousness, it seemed, was inherently incompatible with the collective's ordered structure. The more human experiences they absorbed, the more unstable their network became. Contradictory emotions, conflicting memories, and the beautiful irrationality of human thought were acting like a virus within their perfect system. Raven was the first to notice the change. Look at their eyes, she whispered. They're not moving in unison anymore. The enhanced specimens were beginning to show signs of individual behavior, slight differences in posture, timing, expression. The collective consciousness was struggling to maintain control as human chaos infected their network from within.